The Pentagon is preparing for a Generation Z rebellion that will be using cryptocurrency. So the Pentagon has war roomed a Z-billion scenario where my generation basically says, fuck you, we're not working for your profit, and takes matters into our own hands. They have begun recruiting potential admirals and generals at military colleges and universities across the country. There's a Florida representative, Matt Gaetz, said the government should freeze protesters' funds, which is funny because you can't freeze Bitcoin or cryptocurrency for that matter because it's decentralized. And the best thing about decentralization is that you don't need a central government. So with the government won't be able to freeze Gen Z's crypto. So they basically put it together that Gen Z will use crypto to fight the government and racial and economic inequality. So the 2018 Joint Land, Air, and Sea Strategic Special Programs is preparing to reflect possible depiction of major trends and influences in the world's regions, which basically says they're scouting potential admirals and generals at U.S. military bases for this upcoming surf war. But if you are in the military and you're upset with what's going on and you feel like you aren't able to address racial or economic inequality, I would encourage you to look into the Potemkin Mutiny. The Pentagon has preparing scenarios of a Gen Z rebellion because basically destroyed all prospects of our future, and rebelling against the establishment and the government and central banks would be a better alternative than letting us be like serfs. They want Gen Z to just like sit on our hands while they lead the world into oblivion, with economic, racial, and social injustice being completely ignored. Boomers basically want Gen Z to just sit on our hands and let them lead the world into complete oblivion for their own profit. And one avenue for Gen Z to fight this is with cryptocurrency. If you don't follow cryptocurrency, there was a halving a couple of months ago, and there is going to be a bull run soon. If you want to donate any crypto, my wallets will be down below. How Americans are working more than peasants did in feudal medieval Europe. Economic inequality has been allowed to get so extreme that Americans are living in worse conditions than serfs did in feudal Europe. So serfs didn't own land. They weren't slaves, but they weren't paid enough to have any freedom. And Americans actually work more than serfs because the work days of serfs were dependent on the season. So they would harvest from sunup to sundown. They didn't have to drive Uber or Lyft late into the night or take a second job delivering for DoorDash or Grubhub. And today, with electricity, be it that, I mean, this isn't complaining about electricity, but the work days have been extended far. Generation Z has gone through 9/11, the 2008 crash, illegitimate wars in the Middle East, and now the pandemic and second Great Depression. We're paying again the price for the boomers' greed and lack of transparency with their invention of central banking and their indifference to economic and racial inequality. They have destroyed all of Gen Z's prospects for the future. I mean, my generation wasn't buying homes or living above our means. It was simply that the only jobs that were in the market are minimum wage, part-time service level positions that you don't need a degree for. And now that we are in $1.6 trillion of student loan debt, we realize that things aren't getting better and we cannot rely on any politician or government to save us from their own greed. The normal that we had before was that there was extreme economic and racial inequality, and the normal we had wasn't better than what we're dealing with now, especially with the central banks creating money whenever they feel like it. We also can't go back to working an entire lifetime to pay off medical bills. There's someone who got out of the hospital after fighting COVID, and their medical bill was $1.1 million. The two parties that exist aren't red and blue, it's rich and poor. So with that being said, Gen Z has been robbed of our future, and with realizing that, we are reaching the breaking point with our government and what they've allowed the economy to become. Jerome Powell can print trillions of dollars, but only gives Americans $1,200, which is frankly extremely insulting. And with Gen Z understanding central banking and how economics work, when Bitcoin and cryptocurrency eventually does rise, there will be an opportunity for us to seek a different future than what we've been offered. No politician makes office on the merits of their own accomplishments. It's all campaign contributions and private fundraisers, which gives corporations and billionaires the opportunity to lobby for their own interests. Private contractors can be hired to lead illegitimate wars. When the defense contracting industry has excess in their products, they send it to police departments, which is why you see police departments with tanks and Humvees and LARPs and other weapons of war. The government gave them that capability because when Congress signs contracts with defense industries, the extra always goes to police. Police unions are more powerful than our own government, and Democrats have no problem with funding police the same way as Republicans. Our politics is, in effect, useless. Congress doesn't have power to do anything. They're able to approve bailouts for corporations before bailouts for people. The same thing that happened in 2008. So while billionaires and corporations can give millions to candidates and campaigns for excessive fundraising banquets, it is with the understanding that their private interest needs will be met. Corporations have the power to make 78% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck and withhold health care and exploit labor. It's because politicians have turned a blind eye and allowed them to. There's never been a candidate who has lived on $1,200 for 4 months, working over 40 hours a week. You aren't reaping any of the benefits of your labor. Your labor is being exploited by Uber and Grubhub and Amazon and Postmates. And also really interesting, you can see the CEO shuffle, that's what I call it, where CEOs before COVID and the crash were stepping down en masse, basically because they didn't want to take responsibility for their workers, and they knew that there's a shitstorm coming. Back in February, I think. In February, the 2-year and 10-year yields inverted. That's a major indicator that there's going to be a recession. And the 2-year and 10-year inverted way before COVID was on the WHO's radar. The rich are they've proven that they're indifferent. They may donate to NGOs or do a fundraiser when they feel like it, but they're really just giving to their friends tax exemptions. And Democrats won't tax billionaires when billionaires fund their campaigns. The normal we had before COVID robbed Gen Z of our future, and during the pandemic, billionaires saw their incomes increase in America by $434 billion. We were sold empty promises by our government about what the future could be like, and the prospects of getting a job after college or owning a home. No politician makes it to office on their own merits. They need to have campaign contributions and private fundraisers where they can raise money for their campaign, which is why we have career politicians. Working hard doesn't guarantee that you will have a successful life. For the immigrant workers who are harvesting our food, or the Uber drivers who can't afford to take a day off, or the GoFundMes that low-income people have because they can't afford insurance. These are all indicators that economic inequality has been getting worse and not getting better. While 40 million Americans are unemployed, billionaires saw their income go up by $434 billion. When billionaires and corporations give money to politicians, it's with the understanding that there are strings attached, that once they get into office, they will have to be extremely friendly to corporations and big businesses, which is always at the cost of the working class, which is why we haven't seen wages go up since the 70s, people. There's no politician that's running that lives on $1,200 for 4 months, and the only two classes that exist are the extreme rich and the serfs, or like the poor people. Being that Generation Z is mostly serfs, and that there isn't a Democrat or a Republican that can curb the power of police unions or the central bank or the defense industry, the Pentagon has war-gamed scenarios where we stop letting boomers destroy the planet and the economy. So with all the racial and economic inequality getting worse and not better, the saying is, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. I don't have any expectations for the 2020 presidency. Honestly, I don't care if Trump or Biden wins. I don't trust them to... I mean, they've proved that they're incapable of running a country.
Smoke. Smoke.
Skirt.
Smoke.
In bikini bottom, I'm with Sandy. Bro, you should keep on drinking out of brandy. You should eat the molly like it's candy. Body slam a nigga like I'm Randy. I'm a hot hitter, I'm a clock getter. Leave a dot, hit your block, hit her. Oh, you think you in a group? Get that shit split up. Tryna suck me laying down, I made that bitch sit up. Yeah, hot box, dirty stick, case closed. Beef grill, beef, nigga charcoal. Selling pussy, her but JJ got a barcode. These broke